Hi there, I'm Nick Raven, creator of the Nth Review. It's kind of hard to believe now, but 10 years ago I decided to make my own YouTube channel. I wanted to make longer, more in-depth reviews of video games that truly understood what those games were. At the time, and still a bit to this day, I thought the professionals we trusted to do this weren't doing a good enough job. They get a review code, they play the game ceaselessly, vomit up a 1,200 word verdict, and then publish it as soon as possible to meet their embargo dates. Meanwhile, they're working on 2 or 3 other assignments because that's how you stay competitive and capture the most traffic. I made a chart that reflects that, which I'll talk more about later. Meanwhile, as games were getting bigger, more sophisticated, and required more online connectivity a decade ago, professional reviewers would score them based on play sessions in special cleanroom settings that didn't reflect real-world conditions or what the gamer would end up experiencing buying it off a shelf. These are the paid professionals with the cultural and commercial clout who were supposed to be the ones who upheld standards about the whole thing. So after dabbling with videos on YouTube and writing on the web, I decided to create the Nth Review. Now that I'm at just over 20,000 subscribers and over 2 million views after a decade of doing this, I felt it was time to look back on my time with YouTube so far. There's been a lot of upheaval in the content creation space recently. Lots of creators have hit their peak and have announced that they're moving on to greener pastures. Several more are looking back with their own 10 or 15-year channel retrospectives, but nearly all of these are coming from people who actually became successful and lucky enough doing this to make careers out of it. I'm not one of those people, and I want to be very clear before we go any further. I have always wanted to make this my full-time job, and to that end, I haven't been successful so far. This video is going to reflect that. There are so many directions I could have taken this video, so many myths I could have busted, so many rebuttals I could have made, but this video must eventually come out. Later on, I'm going to drop some key figures for you to orient you to how this channel has grown and how I've grown. But I'm hoping you get something interesting and enjoyable out of my journey, and maybe learn a thing or two about yourself as a creator. What I thought would be a slam dunk to success has been a humbling journey a decade in the making. It's been a lot of wandering through the desert in search of the promised land. The timeline of my Nth Review journey is divided into 4 sections, starting out, a hiatus, a reboot, and a turning point. Before the Nth Review, I was pretty familiar with making stuff. Way back in the day, I was producing Flash animations on Newgrounds, but my first YouTube upload was a World of Warcraft machinima trailer I entered into a BlizzCon contest. I didn't win, but hey. I worked on some short films with friends after that, and even made a feature-length documentary about our trip to E3 in 2009. In 2011, some other friends and I had made a site called Flesh Eating Zipper, which was about a lot of everything, where I did a lot of everything. When that site went under, I wanted to do my own thing. And keep in mind, I was still working full-time in retail and in call centers and stocking shelves and whatever the whole time. All of this was purely passion project stuff in hopes of making connections and making it real. I believed that long-form reviews where I could truly understand what made a game tick would be a huge deal, so I focused on that. I wanted each review to be a numbered volume of a production, like a tailored gem. If that sounds pretentious, it is, but it reflected how much I cared about making each review when others seemed to be shipping them out as soon as they could. I didn't have a target length for these videos. It wasn't my intention to challenge YouTube's limits. I just started outlining and then scripting my thoughts, and they wound up becoming a few thousand words long. The name came all at once. I signed as the letter N on all of my work, and since my videos would come out a lot later than everyone else's, mine would be the however many th review after theirs, so it became the Nth Review. When the font Choplin landed in my mailbox, I knew it had to be the signature font of the series in all its different weights. I initially did all my design and animation. Kirby, come on. I initially did all my design and animations in Adobe Flash, and then moved to Illustrator and After Effects for everything. You can see all my little tips and tricks about how I make my videos in my separate review for just that. My Rise of Nations review performed well at Flesh Eating Zipper, which was a total surprise, so I thought I could just make a decent piece of video content and YouTube would automatically find an audience for it, like it was some kind of meritocracy where good stuff just naturally floats to the top. I'd been uploading videos to YouTube for years, but I didn't quite understand the algorithm or trends or best practices. I was just making what I wanted and thought it would just work out. Except in the case of my Rage review, no one watched that. The very first Nth review covered Ubisoft's open world action game Watch Dogs, which was an early next-gen reveal for the Xbox One and PlayStation 4. I had some pretty high expectations when I very slowly uploaded the 40-minute review on October 23, 2014, but unfortunately, it was nearly half a year after the game had been released and been drubbed critically, so my review didn't find an audience. Well, I had to try again. Review number 2 for Forza Horizon 2 released much more quickly after the game, but it still didn't garner many views or any attention. With a friend's helpful bump on Reddit, number 3 for Destiny wound up becoming the only video on the channel with over 1,000 views for years to follow. Despite Fallout 4's popularity, no one came to my 4th review either. I wasn't getting any algorithmic attention and I was getting really discouraged. If I didn't post the link to it somewhere, no one would see it. Where it wasn't automatically deleted, views for my reviews fell off the moment it rolled off a front page somewhere. I was having to grab each viewer individually like a booth operator in a mall harassing passers-by. Then my computer died, and I had to hold off on the next 2 reviews for Just Cause 3 and Quantum Break. Even after building a new machine and getting through all that, each one still only garnered a couple hundred views each. It's not like I could ask my friends and family to watch this stuff. To this day, there's been little to no crossover between my professional work locally and my YouTube work. These audiences are mutually exclusive. It took me over a year to hit 100 subscribers in a very crowded and competitive market for video game reviews. I was starting to wonder, was I truly bad at this? Was I not getting the thumbnails and the titles just right? In early 2016, with 6 reviews, I was starting to feel like giving up. In retrospect, it felt like I'd missed an entire algorithmic wave by not covering the popular games of the era promptly, like the Souls games, by instead covering a bunch of titles long after they'd released that no one cared about. Inversely, with games that were popular like Fallout 4, it felt like I was releasing my review into a void when everyone else and their grandparents had already covered it. I was not having much luck at all. So I switched tactics and started working on really short videos. Since a tiny minority complained about the length of my videos, which is kinda hilarious considering they would get much longer as I got better at reviewing games, I decided to create a weekly series called Brieflies. There, I'd play a game and do a 4-minute video about it. Simple. It would also be a neat project that could make my channel more robust with content since I'd only done 6 videos to that point and it looked a bit sparse. Maybe that would help things along? A couple of these did well thanks to Reddit posts, but engagement was weak and attention frittered away pretty quickly. Amidst these, I worked on my 7th review for the newly released Deus Ex Mankind Divided, and that didn't land with an audience either. For some historical context, I created this channel before the adpocalypse that required channels to have so many subscribers and watch hours before you could monetize your account. So I still made money, but I don't think people understand, especially aspiring content creators, that just because you're monetized on YouTube doesn't mean you'll actually make much money. Kirby, come on, dude. For the first 5 years of the channel's existence, I made a whopping $4.91. You're such a jerk. Which is definitely far short of the $100 minimum needed for a YouTube payout. By the summer of 2017, it didn't seem like anything I was doing was working. I was changing titles, I was changing thumbnails, trying to promote it here or there, trying to pester people on Twitter whenever I could about my videos, and never once did it ever feel like I got an algorithmic wind. All of my traffic was dying as soon as I stopped promoting it by hand. How in the world was I producing all this stuff and not finding an audience? It felt like I was banging my head against a glass ceiling. There's no way I should be this unlucky after 2.5 years of doing this. You know what they say about the definition of insanity. I teed up once again to do Prey 2017, but I got married in June, and all of those plans changed. This is the point where I went on a channel hiatus, as if anyone would have missed me at that point. You may be thinking, well, I would have given up if I'd been plugging away for 2.5 years with no success too, and you'd probably be right. When my wife and I took a look at it, it became clear that I was putting a lot of time and effort into this channel and not seeing any results. The story took a much darker turn, but this isn't the place for that. Toward the end of 2019, I did make a few small videos, and even if they weren't viral hits, they kicked off a fever in me to work on the Nth Review again. One highlight from this time, however, was that I did get to design and work on an original racing game for phones called Star Pre. Working entirely on a volunteer basis with no money involved eventually killed the project, but I learned a lot about game design, production, and development through the process, including design requirements and scope creep. I also got to work as a producer, sourcing art and assets while flexing my muscles as an artist to do new kinds of illustrations. We got it to a point where it was really fun to play, even if it was a bit lacking in terms of content and polish. It's still my hope to someday be able to fund full development of the game through the channel or some other way and finally bring it to life. I'm not a coder, trust me, I've tried, otherwise I just work on it myself. Like a lot of other YouTubers at the beginning of COVID, I was stuck in my home unemployed, looking for something to do with my time. My relationship status had changed, so I was also alone and handling a lot of trauma from that dark time. In April 2020, the spark came to reboot the Nth Review, but for real. Instead of stabbing blindly into the dark about what might work, which really hadn't worked so far, I began studying other creators. You have to understand, I'd watched YouTube videos from time to time. I'd been watching, say, Anthony Fantano since 2012, but I didn't understand YouTube culture or who many of its creators were. So I studied how to become a YouTuber and not just an aspiring filmmaker who puts videos on YouTube. I actively went out and started watching and subscribing to hundreds of channels, studying what works and what doesn't. I started to understand the landscape and who the big players were. I finally got to see what other video game essayists were doing that had actually gotten them popular in the time that I hadn't. I was really trying to earn my YouTube wings. Even though I'd maintained 230 subscribers through my 2.5-year hiatus, the 2020 reboot was still pretty much like starting from scratch. The channel had grown so dormant that it was shedding subscribers. To this day, my first 7 reviews before the hiatus have the fewest views of all, although Deus Ex Mankind Divided received a different fate for a reason I'm about to get into. My Watch Dogs review went without a single comment for, I shit you not, over 7 years. I started out slowly with a pair of short videos each week, but I quickly decided that I wanted to get back into long-form reviews on a monthly basis as well. I didn't have any money coming in, so I decided to review games I already owned and had already played, maybe even had a reverence for already. The Max Payne trilogy was the 8th review, and it did well to start. Between that and a few of my other shorter videos around city builders like SimCity and City Skylines, I was starting to experience my first bursts of algorithmic attention ever. Soon I was switching from 2 short videos a week to 1. Review number 9 covered Alan Wake and its kinda cool American Nightmare, which I hadn't even played before. It didn't do as well as Max Payne, but the mix of creating long and short form content was pretty interesting. During this time, I was promoting my videos on Reddit and getting swatted down for self-promotion most of the time. It was so odd that Reddit wants people to share original content, but not if the creator is posting it themselves. When my posts weren't being deleted quickly by overzealous moderators, my content usually found an audience, especially in the subreddits of the games I was playing. Not just that, I was subscribing to subreddits for new and small YouTubers and trying to learn best tips and practices that way too. I was liking and replying to nearly every comment on my videos as they came in. I was posting and reposting the link to social media and then moving on to the next video, feeling a little burst with each release that I wasn't getting before the hiatus. One of my favorite things was making the 30-second jewels in After Effects that introduced the reviews in a more dramatic and cinematic way. The channel's momentum was building, my content bucket was growing, but the channel was still really frail and small. I was working hard to try and cover relevant topics, trying to do this and that. The new long-form reviews were performing better than anything before then out of the gate, but it always felt like the wind was ready to leave my sails. On June 27th, 2020, the day after my birthday, viewers tuned in for a whopping 9 minutes of content on the entire channel the entire day. An absolute low. 9 minutes! And then Deus Ex happened. Deus Ex is one of my favorite video games of all time, so it was easy to justify playing through the whole thing yet again to produce review number 10, which wound up running nearly an hour and a half long. I thought so little of its potential for success that I actually pushed its release back a week when it was taking a little too long to make, so that I could make an entirely different video to ensure I had something out for my weekly Thursday drop. Deus Ex was my most popular review to start, but it wasn't until 3 weeks in that the algorithm sent it into the stratosphere. The channel had attracted another 150 subscribers post-Reboot, but as I was starting a new call center job, I would sit in training and see my subscriber count go up by 5 or 10 every time I refreshed the YouTube Studio app. It was absolutely insane, and it wasn't because of a popular post on a web forum somewhere. This was algorithmic attention. Finally! It felt like my luck had finally turned around. The video remained popular through the rest of the year, but that algorithmic gust eventually gave out. I'd hoped to reach 1,000 subscribers and monetize by the end of summer, and that obviously didn't happen. That was a bummer primarily because I hated that call center job, and I was looking for a peaceful transition to the job I'd spent 6 years interviewing for at that point. Wink, wink. Post-release, what Deus Ex really let me do is ask my new audience if I should, or if I could, focus on making the in-depth long-form reviews I'd originally started the channel to create. Over the years, people have asked me why I don't make shorter videos on stuff more often, and it's like, I did! Sometimes I still do, but those videos rarely attract an audience, except when a former game designer has a conniption at 2 AM. I liked making shorter videos and dipping my toes into different subjects in gaming. I liked reading books about gaming or talking about the industry at large, but few of those videos did well, and the rigidity of the weekly release schedule was making me really resentful. There are channels that have grown with a weekly or daily release schedule, but that's just pain. No one can sustain that for very long unless you're offering something really simple or you have a professional crew to bolster you. It's a recipe for burnout, plain and simple. It's miserable. People with 200 subs reviewing a new game every week are just wrecking themselves. I restarted my Patreon and immediately started gaining financial support, which I thought would be the bedrock of my financial success with the channel, while YouTube ads would be kind of the icing on top because of how volatile they are. You'll hear me mention it in the earlier reviews, but my first attempt at a Patreon came in 2015 when I had less than 100 subscribers. When I didn't have any backers, I just shut it down after a few months. After Deus Ex, I decided to focus on something big. The Thief series, a set of games I'd never fully embraced before. Over the next 6 months, I'd build my biggest and longest review ever, longer than any actual edited production I'd worked on to that point, by a factor of 3, by covering 4 full games in one video. With the help of some new friends and supporters, a single Reddit post put me past the subscriber threshold for monetization, and just days before New Year's 2021, I got the email that I was now part of the YouTube Partner Program. That email is still, to this day, one of the most incredible messages I've ever woken up to. But for all the optimism I'd built in 2020, 2021 was... ugh. Thief released in January, and it was a big deal, debuting to about triple the number of views as Deus Ex did, but never receiving a second algorithmic gust like that video did, which I thought would be the standard. I reviewed a lot of games that year, but it didn't feel like I gained much traction. Someone had told me that becoming monetized would cause YouTube to promote my content more in the algorithm, and it absolutely did not. The Outer Worlds was a fun game to review and a fun review to put together for number 11. I knew it wouldn't be a smash hit, but it still felt like a punch in the gut when it barely did Deus Ex numbers when the channel was so much larger by then. I even did a live premiere that I promoted everywhere, and not many people showed up. That was the last time I did one of those. So then I thought, well, let me lean on what seems to be popular on my channel already. Those city builder videos I made a year earlier were pretty popular. Let's do something with SimCity and City Skylines. Well, that didn't do well either. Okay, apparently I'm the immersive sim guy, so what if I tackle the franchise's second most popular game, Human Revolution, when my review for Mankind Divided had gotten a boost after Deus Ex worked out? Well, that underperformed too. But even as the reviews were floundering, or at least not blowing up, I did have a lot of fun learning how to stream. I took on and understood an entirely new set of tools and skills, and started playing games with a live audience on a weekly basis. For a short while, we even did a weekly gaming podcast too. The audience was never big, but they were fans. In fact, I'd started a Discord server just after I'd rebooted the channel a year earlier, and it wasn't until I started streaming that people began to roll in. To this day, my Discord is one of my favorite places on the internet, and it's where other smaller YouTubers have come to ask for help or give advice, and I've seen them grow over the years too. Outside YouTube, I was able to transfer those live streaming skills to my professional career too. By the end of 2021, I was kind of scrambling a bit. I was trying out Shorts, which was YouTube's response to TikTok and seemingly incompatible with the really long reviews I was doing. And that was, I was changing titles and thumbnails to try and get attention, and that was, I learned retrospectively or retroactively through that process long before Test and Compare came down the pipe that your content's not going to get attention if people aren't looking for what you're making and you're not a big creator. Unless you're going for full-on clickbait, titles and thumbnails alone can only do so much if what you're offering isn't in fashion. If I made a Watch Dogs review today, it would be a much better review now because I'm a much better reviewer and essayist than I was a decade ago. But it would also do better because I have 20,000 subscribers now and not 0. Of course, that's not to say that many people would watch it. I wanted to hit 2,000 subs by the end of 2021, but I fell short. It turns out you can't just ask people to subscribe to hit arbitrary milestones, even if you're asking really nicely. That's something your content has to do itself. I wound up gaining fewer subs than the year prior despite really putting my heart into it, really creating a whole lot of content, and really trying to strategize what to make and how to create it. I really wanted to succeed and felt I was losing my shot. And then System Shock came, which was a turning point for the channel. My 2.5 hour System Shock series review, number 15, was a bit of a Hail Mary. Like Deus Ex, I had no strategy attached to it other than it was a couple of games in my wheel well that I thought my subscribers would be interested in. I thought it would be a fun exercise when I wasn't really into horror games. System Shock dropped just days before New Year's 2022 and blew up the channel a few weeks later. I was boo-hooing about not hitting 2,000 subscribers by the end of 2021, and yet I was hitting 5,000 by May and 10,000 the following April. That review didn't just validate my intent or the channel's existence, but developer and IP holder Night Dive actually reached out to say that they'd watched the review and passed it around their development crew. Because of that, they gave me early access to the remake they were working on. That became review number 20, which exploded out of the gate when it came out a year and a half later. It taught me a lot about how important access is when it comes to games, at least new ones, but it was great to hear from the developers themselves too. I got to be more personal with Prey number 17 and Hard Space Shipbreaker number 19. I spent a year researching and producing my 3-hour review/retrospective on Giant Bomb for review number 21, a site and a crew that were very important to me. My Starfield review, number 22, proved I could cover a newer game without a pre-release review code and still reach an audience. I even got to speak on a huge issue I had with urbanist YouTubers, and that did well too, allowing me to start a second channel, End City, and Maybe someday I'll be slaloming between making gaming content and making urban planning content. Maybe there are still 3 reviews with hidden Tony Danzas and no one's found him, which is quite a shame. And that brings us to today. So let's go over the raw numbers as of this point. After 10 years, the Nth Review has over 20,000 subscribers, and with 24 reviews, plus dozens of other edited and live videos, come 2 million views from over 37 million impressions, resulting in over 800,000 watch hours for my videos. Now, I know that's a lot of random numbers. The scale of views and watch hours quickly becomes, well, abstract with those kinds of numbers. So here's some perspective. That's the equivalent of 9 people opening up my very first review for Watch Dogs the minute it went up and watching it ceaselessly in a loop 24/7 in the 10 years since. Widener Field in downtown Colorado Springs only has a seating capacity of 8,000 people, and yet over twice that many people, and then some, have subscribed to my content from around the world. Let me put the growth another way. For this channel's first 5.5 years, until I rebooted it in April 2020, it only received 9,655 views, totaling 805 watch hours. Today, it only takes 3 to 4 days to receive that many views, and about a day and a half to get that many watch hours. 5.5 years! For the Nth Review, I wanted to learn new tools and relearn old ones. I migrated from Sony Vegas as my editor to Premiere Pro. I learned to better sort my thoughts, which allowed me to think of not just games, but art, technology, and more in new ways, which was a valuable skill set as a reporter too. As my ability to review got better, my videos got longer and more in depth. They allowed me to inject more of myself into them. I've also had to learn things about how YouTube works. It's weird to say now, but my channel is big enough that people are actually interested in my stuff when I upload it, rather than requiring me to chase every single viewer by hand like I used to. Still, I have to chase the algorithm, whatever that means, and appease it, whatever that means. I've made enough since becoming remonetized in December 2020 to keep me fed and help me pay rent when I was working part-time, and I have to thank my Patreon supporters and you, the viewer alike, for watching my stuff, for making it happen, for allowing me to, survive, even in my hardest, darkest times. If you aren't a YouTuber or you're not far into your YouTube journey, monetization is really just about gaining fractions of a penny each time someone views one of your videos. There are lots of ways to make money on YouTube once you get bigger, but the most valuable for me have been the volatile spikes of ad revenue from YouTube itself. I mentioned earlier that I'd intended on relying on Patreon as my base form of income and creating content specifically for my biggest fans who contribute monthly. Well, instead, with belts tightening across the creator economy, many of the Patreons for creators I've been following have been declining for years. But then there's always the controversial aspect of luck, which shouldn't be controversial at all. Luck is what we can't control. It's people seeing your video being served quasi-randomly on YouTube's home screen versus quasi-randomly by you posting it on the internet elsewhere. Inversely, it's people choosing not to click on your thumbnail. It's people being interested and not being interested in your content on a moment-to-moment, place-to-place, person-to-person basis. It's people finding your content to begin with. Mr. Beast says that luck isn't a factor in his success, and yet he spent years making tons of videos where he didn't gain any traction at all. He was supremely unlucky with his scores of attempts to game the algorithm until he found his winning formula, one that apparently involves exploiting his participants and defrauding his mostly young viewers. So many successful YouTubers talk about how luck assisted them in their rise. The vast numbers of unlucky content creators who never grow their channels don't get to tell their stories because they remain in obscurity. Chances are I'm very lucky that you're even watching this right now, because I'm still such a small creator in the grand scheme of things. These small, unseen, and unheard content creators are those who, ironically, produce most of the stuff on this platform. One of my favorite testimonials to this fact, one I watch, again, from time to time, is Adam Neely's video about how he hit 1 million subscribers and all the luck he didn't have toiling for years and years, not gaining or growing an audience. Now we can rest easy knowing that he can regularly produce educational music content, even if we don't understand a single bit of it. Another favorite is Veritasium's video about luck, where luck is more about details and defining conditions than rolling dice, because that's what it is. People don't understand that the recipe of an individual's success on YouTube, or anywhere else, can only be verified in retrospect. It can't be used to forecast who's going to blow up, including yourself, or how, or if. The popular video essayists in my niche were the people with the right videos at the right time, and the algorithm basically solidified around them. They're the people from older, bigger outlets who went solo and gained traction immediately with people who already knew who they were, who already know they exist. It's easy to be envious of these handful of people who make thousands of dollars a month on Patreon alone, while you make similar content that's not making anywhere near that kind of money. It's easy to be envious of those who hit 6-digit channel numbers and can post a new video and gain millions of views instantly, quickly, because they have so much momentum. But that's how it is. In time, I unsubscribed to those YouTuber advice subreddits because frankly, they're pretty useless. The blind lead the blind there. People who aren't YouTubers, much less successful ones, keep reciting generic advice about thumbnails and titles for karma. Those with even the slightest bit of success claim luck had nothing to do with it, while stating that all YouTube success is just a matter of accomplishing a handful of simple things the right way. It became infuriating to argue with these people when often the best advice you can give to up-and-coming YouTubers is do the best you can and hope that what you're doing is what the world needs right now. As my channel grew, I also stopped needing to promote as hard. I'm not at the phase where random people share my content in big places, but YouTube's algorithms generate so much more traffic for me than any number of social media posts I can ever make, which is actually pretty satisfying. Trying to understand the enigmatic algorithm is a tough task. Things you think will succeed won't, and things that you think won't will succeed anyway. YouTube says they only pay attention to how often people click on your videos to watch it and how long they watch it for, but this can be counterintuitive too. Several of my videos would debut with really strong click-through and watch times, but then YouTube wouldn't feed it any more impressions by putting them in front of more potential viewers. It turns out you can actually wind up in a position so niche, like I have, where your excited fans click through and watch the video to the end, but no one outside of that bubble will. YouTube doesn't tell you this is happening except in an FAQ where they describe that it does actually happen. So now I don't even pay attention to click through except to acknowledge that it will go down over time as more and more people are exposed to my content. After 10 years, you may be even wondering what the point of a video game review is. A number of prominent outlets have removed their scores, but they're still reviewing games because launch day reviews still garner lots of hits. But as my channel's trajectory has proven out, people like reviews for older games too. After a decade of working on the nth review, I've developed this chart, which is basically the popularity of a review over time. The best time to drop a review is, well, whenever the review embargo for a game ends or when the game releases, whichever comes first. If you can gain an exclusive and release before that, it's even better. But the thing is, as soon as the game releases, and every small-time YouTuber and website can go out and buy it and review it themselves, the amount of traffic you gain plummets as everyone's share of the pie divides even further. From there, the amount of views you can gain depends on the sturdiness of the game and its long-time appeal, or just how big of a channel you are. For example, remember my Deus Ex Human Revolution review that dropped at the end of 2021? Today, it sits at just north of 50,000 views. HBomberGuy, a much bigger creator, dropped his review 6 months later and garnered 15 million views. That's just how it works. As a reviewer, I've avoided the first part of this chart because digesting a game in 2 weeks and then releasing a quick verdict before the embargo breaks actually kind of sucks. There are popular YouTubers who clearly only play and record the first few hours of a game, release it as a vaguely worded review, and get hundreds of thousands of views. Over the years, my reviews have fallen all over this chart with only a few exceptions. Starfield is a popular game and one of my most popular reviews, so it should have bombed. But it didn't. After 10 years, did the nth review single-handedly change how people rate and receive video game reviews? No, but it's great to be part of the scene. I want to close out by talking a little more philosophically about art and creativity as a whole. We are all artists, every single one of us. It's the unique gift that we all have as beings in the universe. Yeah, we all have our different media that we like to work in, whether it's visual, performative, literary, technological, etc. We all have our different skill abilities. We have our lesser or greater ability to be multidisciplinary and so on, but we're all artists. But there's another axis, our ambition, confidence, and thirst to make our art real, to conjure it into existence, to turn the ideas in our head into things that we and others can experience. In the time since I've rebooted this channel, I've also been a reporter for my local art scene, and I've seen so many different kinds of expression and the struggle of people who are passionate about their creativity. Like small YouTubers, these local artists are trying to shift into a place where they can focus on it as a means of living because it's their calling. It's what they're good at. It's what their minds and their souls scream for. This is all to say that, unfortunately, that so much of YouTube and creativity as a whole boils down to one single metric: money. Not the experience of the video or the value of the channel or the uniqueness of the creator or their cultural impact. No, it's all about how much money it brings in. Whether it's watching Colin and Samir or trawling through r/box office, there's so much commentary about a YouTube channel or a franchise film that are reduced to little more than their monetary value. It's fun to think about, but it shouldn't be the sole or primary way that we value public art like our YouTube creations, or anything else. Another big reason why I unsubscribe to those small YouTuber advice subreddits is that so much advice boiled down to gaming the system for profit, advocating for just stealing other people's content, or making highly derivative content based on existing successful content, getting your bag, so to speak. A poster will brag about reaching 100,000 subs in just a few months because they found the secret to the YouTube algorithm. What's the secret? Theft, dishonesty, blatantly pandering content that's designed purely for engagement metrics, quickly produced work thanks to generative AI, and honestly, bullshit. That's not art. That's just a scheme to make money that has art involved. These are the same people who tell you to delete and upload your content for another swing at the algorithmic slot machine. But what good is gaming the system to be a profitable YouTube creator if you're just grinding the whole time? What good is it if you succeed and your channel has little intrinsic value because no one cares about what you actually produce? And what good are 100 viral hits when no one's actually engaged with your channel as a whole? What good is it if you put in all that work to steal content and game the system only for YouTube to permanently demonetize you for reused content? These grifters don't understand that building channels this way temporarily attracts audiences who won't stick around. It populates the platform with trash so you can make a buck, which devalues everyone else's actual work. As someone who isn't a full-time content creator, which is something I still dream about, I wonder how much more money or how many more views I could make by just reacting to other gaming content with my own takes. How much bigger could my Nth City channel be if I just rip on a sea of urbanist YouTubers in video after video, rather than doing all the research and interviews and work I did that actually provide solutions for people? Would I be bigger if I uploaded more often, if I cheated the algorithm, if I were funnier, if I had more After Effects compositions and fancier editing? Here's the thing. I know what I want to do with this channel in the next decade because I've known what I've wanted to do with this channel for the last decade. That's why I keep doing it. I'm tired of making content that chases trends or is just another take on a popular subject in hopes of gaining clout or views, or ad dollars. Deus Ex and later System Shock proved to me that I should stop trying to review games out of strategy and just review the games I want to review whenever I want to do it, even if no one comes to see it. I have a niche because people come to me for a reliable thing, insightful gaming content that's entertaining to watch, or just listen to. I want to keep making these multi-hour reviews more often. I've had plans for even bigger ones over the years too, but I can only ask people to subscribe to my Patreon and my YouTube channel so many times before we both get irritated. My channel has a ceiling and a maximum capacity that reflects my content's appeal. I will never be a top 1000 YouTuber for that reason, and that's okay. But I'm also ambitious and insatiable. On top of doing this full time, I want to do a weekly podcast again, preferably in person, in an office someday. I want to replicate Giant Bomb's Unprofessional Fridays and stream games to an audience with a crew. I want to work with friends and have a warehouse where we do stuff like Red Letter Media. I don't want to just be me. I want to work in a team. I want to make games, I want to make movies, I want to do this and that and the other thing. I want to do it all. It's been incredibly easy for me to become envious of those who've experienced more success on this platform, those who have gotten far more algorithmic attention, those who have made far more money, those who are in the right place at the right time. It's easy for me to feel like I've missed a boat, or several of them, and by the time I get a chance to swing at bat, the game will be over. That's normal. I have to push through it. So do you. For now, I'm here, and I'm working on this because that's what makes me happy. This is my art. I'm not good enough at any particular skill to get full-time work doing that stuff. But here, you guys watch this and maybe even enjoy it. Everything else follows from that. Thank you guys for liking and subscribing and even watching to this point. If you're a creator, and I know you are, keep creating. Do what you love and not what the market tells you to do. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. This may not have been the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It may not be the first, but it is the nth review. It's my nth review, and it's yours too. Here's to the next 10 years.